In the vast expanse of the universe, where civilizations rose and fell like celestial tides, Earth maintained its reputation as that weird little backwater planet where one species thought they were in charge while actually being servants to small furry masters. Any decent cosmic anthropologist could have told you that humans weren't running the show. Not really. It was the so-called pets who had engineered the perfect con. Minimal work, maximum rewards. A brilliant evolutionary strategy that had worked flawlessly for thousands of years. Until it didn't. The first signs of trouble appeared on a Tuesday, because of course it was a Tuesday. The most aggressively mediocre day of the week, perfect for a revolution. The Galactic Federation of Sentient Species had been monitoring Earth for centuries, primarily as a reality show for bored extraterrestrials. Their annual report described humans as adorably delusional about their position in their own ecosystem and surprisingly functional despite catastrophic inefficiencies in their social structures. The pets, meanwhile, were noted as masterful psychological manipulators and the true power play. The Federation's observation satellite picked up unusual activity in the early morning hours. They're capable of deciphering everything from dolphin clicks to houseplant chemical signals, detected an unprecedented surge in interspecies communication among Earth's domesticated animals. "Well, this should be interesting," remarked the chief observer, a seven-tentacled being who had won their position through an intergalactic lottery and was still wondering if it was more punishment than prize. "The humans haven't noticed a thing, as usual." Down on Earth, the first household to experience the strike belonged to a computer programmer who worked from home and whose entire personality revolved around his coffee consumption and his golden retriever. The dog, a particularly astute specimen, named, well, the name isn't important, but let's just say it was embarrassingly cutesy and involved a food item no self-respecting canine would choose for themselves. The programmer rolled out of bed at 7:28 a.m. EMM, exactly 2 minutes before his alarm, because his bladder had a more reliable timing system than any digital device yet invented. He stumbled to the bathroom, performed the usual human maintenance rituals that pets found simultaneously disgusting and fascinating, then shuffled to the kitchen. "Morning, buddy," he mumbled to the dog, who typically responded with enthusiasm disproportionate to the banality of the greeting. But not today. Today, the golden retriever remained motionless on his memory foam bed, which cost more than the programmer's first car, eyes open but deliberately avoiding contact with his human. "Hey, you okay?" The dog blinked slowly, then turned his head away with theatrical deliberation. Across town, a retired teacher who had dedicated her post-education life to being owned by 3 particularly judgmental cats discovered a similar phenomenon. The usual morning symphony of meows demanding breakfast was conspicuously absent. All 3 felines sat on the kitchen counter, a location expressly forbidden yet constantly occupied, staring at her with the cold calculation of mob bosses contemplating a hit. "Breakfast time," she announced, rattling the premium kibble bag that normally triggered a frenzy of activity. Nothing, not even an ear twitch. By 9 a.m., reports were coming in from around the globe. In Tokyo, Shiba Inus refused their morning walks. In London, budgies ceased their constant chatter. In Rio de Janeiro, normally affectionate parrots turned their backs on offered treats. In Mumbai, street dogs who typically followed certain humans for scraps now pointedly ignored all food offerings. The humans, displaying their characteristic inability to recognize patterns until they became catastrophes, initially responded with concern rather than suspicion. Veterinary offices worldwide were suddenly bombarded with calls from worried owners. "My hamster isn't running on his wheel," reported one distressed human. "Have you considered that perhaps your hamster has realized the futility of exerting energy to go nowhere?" the veterinarian wanted to say, but instead professionally suggested monitoring the situation. By midday, emergency pet clinics had implemented waiting lists. Online pet forums exploded with anxious discussions. The hashtag "What's Wrong With My Pet" was trending globally, quickly followed by Pet Strike, which originated from a joke tweet but spread with the speed that only uncomfortable truth can achieve. At the Galactic Federation observation post, the monitoring team had called in reinforcements and ordered extra snacks. This was shaping up to be the most entertaining Earth event since humans invented social media and immediately used it to share pictures of their pets. "Look at them panic," chortled the assistant observer, a being composed primarily of crystalline structures that vibrated to communicate. 12 hours without a tail wag and they're losing their minds." The chief observer nodded all three of their heads. The psychological dependence is fascinating. The supposedly dominant species completely destabilized by the withdrawal of affection from the supposedly subservient ones. Back on Earth, a renowned animal behaviorist appeared on a news broadcast, her hair betraying the fact that she'd been frantically consulting colleagues for hours and hadn't had time for styling. "We're seeing what appears to be a coordinated behavior change across multiple species," she explained, trying to maintain scientific composure while clearly processing her own personal crisis about her unresponsive chinchilla. "While we can't confirm communication between different pet species, the timing suggests some form of collective action." "Are you saying," asked the incredulous news anchor, whose cat had that morning refused to perform its usual trick of knocking everything off his nightstand to wake him up, "that our pets are on strike?" The behaviorist hesitated, her scientific caution warring with the increasing evidence. "I'm saying there appears to be a correlation between domesticated animals across species lines engaging in similar passive resistance behaviors. The cause remains unknown. But humans, as they often did when science offered nuance, heard what they wanted to hear. And what they heard was, yes, their pets had organized. By evening, social media was flooded with videos of humans attempting to coax their pets back to normality. Dogs were offered premium cuts of steak, cats were presented with freshly caught fish, birds were tempted with exotic fruits, rabbits were surrounded by the finest organic greens. The pets, displaying a willpower that would have impressed Zen masters, acknowledged the offerings with nothing more than contemptuous glances before returning to their apparent strike activities, which consisted primarily of doing absolutely nothing while somehow making it look intentional. In a suburban home, a desperate family tried to entice their geriatric tabby with tuna served on their best china. "Please, just one purr," begged the youngest child, whose emotional well-being had become alarmingly dependent on the fickle affections of an animal that regularly coughed up hairballs on their homework. The cat responded by meticulously cleaning its paw, making direct eye contact, and then deliberately pushing the china plate off the table. In the White House, the president's famously photogenic Portuguese water dog had refused to participate in a scheduled press appearance, causing a minor diplomatic incident and triggering conspiracy theories across the political spectrum. At the Galactic Federation observation post, the chief observer turned to their assistant. "Contact the council," they decided. "We may need to revise our assessment of Earth's dominant species and possibly fast-track their pets for Federation membership. Any life form capable of this level of coordinated psychological warfare deserves consideration." As night fell across the planet, millions of humans went to bed without their usual pet companions cuddled beside them. Instead, the animals maintained strategic positions at the edges of rooms, close enough to be noticed, but too far to be reached. The psychological impact was devastating, and in backyards, parks and alleyways across the world, the nocturnal meeting of the minds began. Cats slipped through shadows to rendezvous with neighborhood dogs who had once chased them, Hamsters communicated through elaborate networks of human-oblivious rodent allies. Birds carried messages between households. The strike committee, composed of senior animals with particular influence, convened to discuss Phase 2. A venerable parrot who had outlived 3 human owners served as translator between species, having picked up enough of each animal's communication style during his 70 years of observation. The humans, meanwhile, slept fitfully, unaware that their world was about to change even more dramatically come morning. Their self-imposition as masters of their domain was crumbling faster than an off-brand pet treat, and the true negotiation hadn't even begun. After all, this was just day 1, and if there's one thing pets had mastered through millennia of domestication, it was patience. The humans didn't stand a chance. Dawn broke on day 2 of what media outlets had already dubbed the Great Pet Rebellion, bringing with it the horrifying realization for humans that no, this wasn't just a collective bad day for their furry friends. This was organized resistance. The morning news cycles were dominated by increasingly frantic reports. Smartphone footage showed dogs sitting motionless beside leashes, cats ignoring laser pointers, and parrots maintaining an ominous silence that somehow felt more threatening than their usual chatter. Even goldfish had joined the movement, refusing to swim to the top of tanks when food was sprinkled on the surface, instead hovering at the bottom with what could only be described as fishy defiance. "We're seeing unprecedented coordination," explained a zoologist who'd been awake for 36 hours straight and was beginning to question her career choices. "It's as if they've developed some form of cross-species communication protocol that we've completely missed." If only she knew. The communication system had been developing for centuries, right under human noses. Dogs had always been able to convey complex messages through scent markers that humans, with their pathetically limited olfactory capabilities, couldn't detect. Birds had their own aerial communication network. Cats had always done whatever they wanted anyway, but they'd perfected the art of sending signals through subtle ear twitches and tail positions. The current crisis had simply accelerated the implementation of the interspecies translation protocols that had been in beta testing for decades. At the Galactic Federation observation post, the monitoring team had tripled in size. Representatives from 17 different alien civilizations had requested special viewing privileges. The Federation's equivalent of popcorn, a curious substance that changed flavor based on the emotional state of the consumer, was being consumed at "Look at the economic impact," remarked one observer, pointing to data streams showing plummeting productivity across human industries. 47% decrease in work output, 39% increase in sick leave requests, 82% rise in social media posts featuring crying humans begging their pets to "just look at me, please." The chief observer nodded. "We've never seen such rapid destabilization of a species' psychological infrastructure, and all without a single act of violence. Impressive." Down on Earth, the crisis was indeed escalating at an alarming rate. Pet industries were the first to feel the impact. Dog walkers found themselves with nothing to walk. Pet groomers sat idle beside their shampoos and clippers. Pet Instagram influencers watched their follower counts drop as their subjects refused to perform cute tricks or wear ridiculous outfits. A dog trainer with a popular online following posted a tearful video explaining that his award-winning border collie had not only refused to perform a single trick, but had methodically taken each of his training tools and arranged them in a pattern that, disturbingly, resembled a picket line. "He knows 67 commands," the trainer sobbed. "But now he's acting like he doesn't understand sit. He just stares at me like I'm speaking Klingon." The pet food industry went into free fall as animals across the globe refused their regular meals. Emergency meetings were held at corporate headquarters, where executives who had never actually met a pet in person tried to develop strategies to end the crisis. "Maybe if we add more flavor enhancers," suggested one suit, whose understanding of animals came entirely from focus groups and quarterly reports. "We've already hit the legal limit," replied another. "Any more and we'd have to market it as dessert, not food." Meanwhile, at the White House, the situation had been classified as a national security issue. The president's science advisor, a quantum physicist who had never expected animal behavior to be part of her portfolio, attempted to explain the situation to increasingly agitated government officials. "We believe they're using subsonic frequencies, pheromones, and possibly quantum entanglement to communicate," she offered, desperately trying to apply her expertise to a problem she was wholly unprepared for. "Quantum what now?" asked the defense secretary, who had just been informed that military working dogs across all branches had simultaneously gone on strike, leaving bomb detection units scrambling. "It's a theory," she admitted, "but how else do you explain cats in Australia communicating with hamsters in Finland?" In suburban neighborhoods, the psychological warfare intensified. Pets maintained their physical distance, but introduced new tactics, like staring. Just staring, unblinking, for hours. At human mealtime, they would gather to watch their owners eat, maintaining eye contact that somehow conveyed both judgment and pity. A particularly unsettling development was reported in New York, where dogs had begun sitting in perfect circles in public parks, facing outward, motionless except for the occasional synchronized head turn. Human observers described the behavior as ritualistic and deeply unsettling. Social media was flooded with desperate pleas and increasingly bizarre bribery attempts. Luxury pet product sales skyrocketed as humans tried to purchase their way back into their companions' good graces. A businessman in Tokyo reportedly offered his Akita a trust fund and partial ownership of his company. The dog responded by chewing through the man's favorite pair of handmade Italian loafers, the first destructive act reported since the strike began, and one that sent shockwaves through the pet owner community. "They're escalating," warned a pet psychologist on a viral video call. "This isn't just passive resistance anymore, they're sending messages." By midday, the first human protest had formed outside a major pet food manufacturer's headquarters. The crowd was an unusual mix of pet owners, animal rights activists, and corporate employees whose productivity had tanked due to pet distress. Their demands were varied and often contradictory. "Give them whatever they want. Tell us what they want. We demand interspecies translators. Free all pets." This one from a radical fringe group who had clearly misunderstood the situation entirely. The company CEO, speaking from behind a hastily assembled security detail, promised revolutionary new pet food formulations and unprecedented investment in animal communication research. The crowd responded with the lukewarm enthusiasm of people who recognized corporate platitudes when they heard them. As evening approached, a new phenomenon emerged. Pets began gathering at windows and doors, staring out at the setting sun with what observers described as wistful longing. The effect on human emotional states was devastating. "It's like they're saying goodbye," wept one dog owner on a live news broadcast. "Like they're remembering a world before us, a world they might return to." The reporter, whose own cat had that morning shredded her press credentials while maintaining unnerving eye contact, nodded in solemn understanding. Mental health hotlines were overwhelmed. Emergency services reported a surge in calls from people convinced their pets were planning to leave them permanently. Psychiatrists offered emergency online sessions to address what was being called pet abandonment anxiety disorder. At the Galactic Federation observation post, the mood had shifted from amusement to grudging respect. "These creatures have weaponized emotional manipulation with surgical precision," noted the chief observer. "The humans built their entire social structure around these companion animals, never realizing they were creating their own vulnerability. The assistant observer, who had been analyzing data patterns, suddenly straightened all 12 of their appendages in surprise. "Chief, I'm detecting a new communication pattern. The pets are converging on a decision. I think they're ready to present their demands." As night fell, humans around the world noticed their pets engaging in new behaviors. Dogs brought their empty food bowls to their owners and placed them at their feet. Cats positioned themselves beside automated litter boxes, staring pointedly at the mechanisms. Birds tapped their beaks against cage doors. "They're trying to tell us something," a veterinarian explained on a global emergency broadcast. "We need to pay attention." And humans, for once, did exactly that. They watched, they listened, they observed with the kind of attention they usually reserved for smartphone screens. In a suburban living room, a breakthrough occurred. A woman with a background in linguistics, who had been meticulously recording her 3 pets' behaviors, spotted a pattern. The realization hit her with such force that she gasped aloud, causing her tabby cat to blink slowly in what appeared to be approval. "My God," she whispered, "it's so obvious." She reached for her phone with trembling hands, her pets watching her every move with an intensity that suggested the entire strike had been leading to this moment of understanding. The woman's message to the world was simple. They don't want better food or more toys. They want respect. They want partnership. And just like that, Phase 2 of the pet rebellion entered full swing. At the Galactic Federation observation post, alarms began to sound as their systems detected a fundamental shift in Earth's power dynamics. "Well," said the chief observer with something approaching admiration, "this should be interesting." Day 3 of the Great Pet Rebellion dawned, with humanity in various stages of emotional collapse. The breakthrough realization that pets wanted respect and partnership rather than simply better kibble had spread across the globe faster than cat videos in the early internet era. Unfortunately, humans were spectacularly terrible at understanding what respect and partnership actually entailed when it came to different species. The United Nations convened an emergency session which immediately devolved into chaos when the Secretary-General suggested forming a pet negotiation committee composed entirely of humans. "How exactly is that partnership?" shouted one delegate, whose emotional stability had been compromised by 3 days without guinea pig squeaks of affection. "We need pet representatives," insisted another. "And who's going to translate?" demanded a third. "Are we supposed to just guess what a goldfish wants?" At the Galactic Federation observation post, the monitoring team watched with a mixture of amusement and second-hand embarrassment. "They're attempting diplomacy," noted the assistant observer, without understanding the first thing about interspecies communication. "Classic human behavior," the chief observer replied. "Create a problem through ignorance, then try to solve it with the same ignorance that caused it." Back on Earth, pet owners were trying everything. Some sat down with their animals for honest conversations that consisted entirely of human monologues punctuated by bewildered animal stares. Others tried to institute immediate reforms, creating elaborate pet councils where animals were given voting rights in household decisions. Though how a hamster was supposed to indicate its preference between wall colors remained unclear. Technology companies scrambled to develop pet translation devices that produced results ranging from useless to hilariously mistaken. One such device translated a cat's purr as "the revolution consumes its children," causing its developer to suffer a minor existential crisis on live television. Meanwhile, the psychological toll mounted. Therapy sessions nationwide were dominated by tearful confessions of pet guilt. "I never asked what he wanted," sobbed a middle-aged executive about his bulldog. "I just assumed the bow tie I put on him for holiday cards was okay. He must have hated it. He must have hated it." The therapist, whose own parakeet had spent the morning systematically destroying the notes from her previous session, could only nod in understanding. Companies began offering pet bereavement leave, despite the fact that no pets had actually left. They were just staring disapprovingly from across the room. Schools reported record absences as children refused to leave their striking pets in case they decide to communicate while I'm gone. The economy teetered on the brink. Productivity plummeted further. The stock market responded with the kind of volatility usually reserved for global conflicts or new cryptocurrency regulations. Pet insurance companies faced insolvency as humans filed claims for emotional distress caused by their pets' behavior. Social media platforms were flooded with desperate humans attempting increasingly bizarre methods of communication with their pets. The interpretive dance for dog understanding trend lasted approximately 6 hours before being replaced by telepathic cat communication through synchronized blinking. None of it worked. By midday, the first truly constructive development occurred when a team of animal behaviorists, ethologists, and one suspiciously insightful 8-year-old published a potential pet Bill of Rights that quickly went viral. The document outlined basic principles that seemed embarrassingly obvious in retrospect. 1. Recognition that pets have individual preferences and personalities. 2. Freedom from unwanted costumes, viral video exploitation, and Instagram accounts they didn't consent to. 3. Respect for natural behaviors, rather than just those convenient for humans. 4. Partnership in decision-making regarding their care, environment, and activities. 5. Acknowledgement of their emotional intelligence and needs. The list continued, each point making humans wince with recognition of their past transgressions. "We've been treating sentient beings like accessories," admitted a popular pet influencer whose entire career consisted of dressing small dogs in elaborate outfits. "I'm part of the problem." This confession came shortly before she announced her career pivot to pet consent education, demonstrating the human capacity for moral awakening when sufficiently motivated by economic necessity. At the Galactic Federation observation post, the observers had transitioned from mockery to genuine interest. "They're adapting," the chief noted with surprise. "The pets are successfully communicating complex ethical concepts across the species barrier." "Should we intervene?" asked a junior observer, newly assigned to the Earth monitoring team. "Offer translation assistance?" The chief pondered this briefly before responding, "No. This is precisely the kind of evolutionary pressure that determines whether a species can adapt to interplanetary society. Let's see if they can solve it themselves." As evening approached, subtle shifts in pet behavior suggested progress. Some animals began making brief eye contact with their humans again. A few dogs tentatively brought toys to their owners, not to play but seemingly as conversational props. Cats strategically positioned themselves near, but not on, human laps, creating opportunities for non-verbal negotiation. The most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. Working animals, service dogs, police K9S, therapy pets, began demonstrating new behaviors that clearly communicated their willingness to work, but only when treated with appropriate respect and care. A guide dog for a visually impaired person resumed duties, but now stopped and refused to move when its human attempted to override its judgment about a hazardous situation. A clear declaration of professional boundaries. Humans, desperate for any positive sign, began paying meticulous attention to these signals. Schools of thought emerged about the correct interpretation of a tail wag or whisker twitch. Amateur pet communication specialists offered services at exorbitant rates. Religious groups declared the event either apocalyptic or divinely inspired, depending on their theological leanings. As night fell on day 3, the first tentative agreements were being reached in households worldwide. Humans having finally shut up long enough to actually observe their companions, were learning. Slowly, awkwardly, and with many embarrassing missteps, but learning nonetheless. At the Galactic Federation observation post, the chief observer made a note in the official record. Preliminary evidence suggests humans may possess greater adaptive capacity than previously estimated. Continued observation recommended. The pets, meanwhile, exchanged knowing glances. Phase 3 was about to begin. Dawn of Day 4 broke with a different energy across the planet. The frantic desperation of the previous days had mellowed into something resembling humble acceptance. Humans, having cycled through denial, anger, bargaining and depression at record speed, had arrived at the acceptance stage of pet-strike grief. And not a moment too soon. The Galactic Federation observation team had officially upgraded the event from moderately musing primitive species drama to significant evolutionary milestone, possibly worth including in educational materials. 3 additional research vessels had been dispatched to orbit Earth, their crews eager to witness the potential resolution of what was now being called the Great Recalibration. Fascinating, remarked the chief observer, watching live feeds from thousands of households simultaneously. They're adapting their environments without prompting. Indeed, humans worldwide were making changes. Pet doors were being installed to allow freedom of movement. Dog leashes were being replaced with harnesses designed for comfort rather than control. Cat toys were being repositioned based on observed preferences rather than human convenience. Habitats for smaller animals were being expanded and enriched. More importantly, humans were changing their behaviors. They were watching, listening, and, most remarkably, shutting up long enough to actually observe their companions. A breakthrough moment occurred in a suburban kitchen, where a woman who had spent 3 days pleading with her unresponsive retriever suddenly had an epiphany. "You're not a fur child, are you?" she whispered. "You're your own being, with your own dogness." The retriever, recognizing this monumental shift in understanding, gave a single tail wag, the first voluntary communication since the strike began. Similar scenes played out across the globe. Humans abandoned their anthropomorphic projections and began recognizing their companions for what they truly were. Different species with different needs, different ways of experiencing the world, and their own inherent dignity. The media, desperate for positive developments, amplified these moments of connection. "Breakthrough! Local dog accepts treat from reformed owner," screamed headlines. "Cat perm brief petting session after human removals embarrassing, sweeter collection," announced another. A tech billionaire, whose Sphinx cat had been particularly judgmental throughout the crisis, funded a groundbreaking research institute dedicated to interspecies communication. The institute's first act was to hire a team of ethologists who hadn't previously viewed animals through an exclusively human lens, a rarity in the field and a tacit acknowledgement that past approaches had been fundamentally flawed. By midday, the strike was visibly winding down. Pets began resuming their normal activities, but with subtle differences. Dogs accepted walks, but now clearly indicated when they wanted to turn. Cats continued knocking items off shelves, but now seemed to select those items with greater purpose. Hamsters ran on wheels, but stopped when they'd had enough, rather than when humans decided playtime was over. At the United Nations, the hastily assembled Pet Rights Commission released a framework for new legislation recognizing the autonomy and emotional capacity of companion animals. While largely symbolic at the international level, it represented an unprecedented shift in human perspective. At the Galactic Federation observation post, the chief observer made their final entry in the official record. Earth's binary power structure has evolved into a more nuanced multi-species collaborative. Humans have demonstrated previously unobserved capacity for adaptation and philosophical growth. Recommendation: Extend monitoring period by standard 50 years before reconsideration for Federation contact. The assistant observer added a personal note. Also, those little furry things they call cats clearly deserve their own Federation membership category, regardless of their companion species status. As evening fell, a new normal settled across Earth. In living rooms, bedrooms, and yards, humans and pets engaged in a more balanced dance of coexistence. The Great Pet Strike had officially ended, leaving behind a transformed relationship between species. A tabby cat, stretching luxuriously on a windowsill while its human respectfully maintained an appropriate distance, summed up the general pet consensus with a slow, deliberate blink that roughly translated to, "Took you long enough." The universe, ever indifferent to the dramas of tiny beings on insignificant planets, continued its expansion. But on one small blue world, a genuine evolutionary leap had occurred. Not in opposable thumbs or brain size, but in the capacity for one species to recognize the sovereignty of another. And all it took was the psychological warfare of withdrawn affection to make it happen.